Well, welcome, Carin Winter, and I'm so honored that you are now my fourth guest for my YouTube channel, September's Mission Foundation. And I hope people will start subscribing and seeing how wonderful our guests are and powerful. And go women. And I call ourselves the GodStars, as you know, and Soul Sisters. You're one of my little group of soul sisters, and I'm proud to say you're my friend for over 20 years, and we've done a lot together. And I'd like you to say who you are, and I think you're gonna introduce yourself and do your little thing. So welcome.
Well, thank you so much for the welcome, and I'm so excited to be on this podcast. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm honored to be on it. I know Reverend Bill is on it, and Hillary Clinton. You have such outstanding guests, so I'm humbled and honored and grateful. So thank you so much, Monica. So Monica and I, well, maybe should I start with leading the mindfulness practice? I think I'll start with that. Yeah. So just an introduction really quick, and then we'll get into more later, but my name is Carin Winter. Monica was the founding board member with me when we started MissionBe back in the day, 8 years ago. And it's been wonderful ever since. We've made a lot of impacts teaching kids mindfulness, social emotional learning, and movement in schools. And MissionBe was originally under September's mission for the first 6 years, as they were our fiscal sponsors. And even though they're not our fiscal sponsors on paper, they are our big sister. Monica is like a same age, but bigger, a little bit bigger, just a year or so, sister. And so September's mission is like MissionBe's big sister. And so they have been a guiding light for us in helping us get launched, and are still today and always will be. So it's really an honor to be here. And I'm going to tell a story today about how Monica and I met. It's a tragic story that is infused with a lot of love and a lot of beauty. But before I start, one way that we like to start our meetings at MissionBe is typically in prayer and meditation. So I think we're both wearing our crosses today, I say. We're not a Christian organization technically, but we have very similar beliefs personally, on a personal level. So anyway, let's start with the universal meditation on just connecting with our breath. And we'll do this for around 3 minutes, and then we'll start the interview. So Monica and I are going to close our eyes, and we can just place our hands on our laps, roll the shoulders back and down. And then just bring one hand just to the top of the belly between the ribs. And just feeling the safety of this space, infused with friendship and connection. So just taking a soft, gentle, deep breath in. And a soft, gentle, deep breath out. Inhale, feel the belly and heart rise as you breathe in. And fall as you breathe out. Inhale, the belly and heart rise. And exhale, the heart and belly fall. And just beginning to relax the muscles in the face. Feeling the jaw soften, the space between the eyes relax. And then going ahead and deepening the breath, feeling the belly and heart rise up. Feel the shoulders fill with breath. And then as you exhale, feel a wave of relaxation washing down your spine to your lower back. And then breathe back into the belly again, feel like expand up into the heart. And then as you exhale, feel a wave of relaxation washing down your arms to your palms and fingertips. And then breathe deep into your belly, feel your belly and heart expand. And then feel that same wave of relaxation washing down your legs to the soles of your feet and the tips of your toes. And then take another soft, gentle, deep breath in. And a deep breath out, feeling the safety of this moment. And then just imagine a beautiful beam of sunlight. So harnessing the imagination of a child, imagine a beautiful beam of sunlight washing over the head, moving down through every cell of your body. Just imagine that your whole body is filling with this beautiful light. And inviting this light to bring you a sense of peace, trusting in this day, in this moment. And taking a deep breath in. And then exhale, just letting go of anything that's not serving you. Another deep breath in. And deep breath out. And then just setting our intention for this hour-long interview to be filled with inspiration and hope and heartfulness. Another deep breath in, deep breath out. And then just thanking our angels, Monica's angel Michael, my angel Beth, and all the angels that support the work that we're doing. And then when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes and open your eyes. Cool.
Okay, we're awake.
Perfect.
Love and light. Love and light. Love and light. That's my thing now. I'm very big on
Love
love.
and light. Yeah, when we're in schools, we can't talk about angels or God, but we can
light.
do it when we're hanging out.
Love and light is okay because
personal level. Yeah. All right. So yeah. So my background is I was a social worker for 10 years at Islip High School. Prior to that, I worked in the juvenile justice system and the foster system for 4 years as a clinical social worker for a bit, a casework supervisor, working with hard to place youth. And then before that, I worked with people with disabilities and with homeless people that were homeless populations. But my passion's really working with children and adolescents, just as Monica, your passion's been working with the little ones, the pre-K. So I was always drawn more to the adolescent group. And so that's what I did in the high school. And I really loved that job for 10 years. And I served on a task force to help combat substance abuse. And 8 of the 10 years that I worked at Islip, I also owned a yoga studio in East Islip that I ran for a long time. And that was also really rewarding. So I kind of infused what I learned through yoga practice and breathing in a very secular way, like a non-religious way, into school. So I started a yoga club at my school. And then before I started MissionBe, I started teaching this mindfulness curriculum that I had developed while I was at Islip. And I started teaching it during the gym, and more than 50%, I think it was like 52% of the students signed up to do the program. And then I was like, well, I should bring this to the elementary school. So we started developing a curriculum for the elementary school. And then right around that same time, I reached out to Monica. Now, Monica and I had met 10 years prior. So under unfortunate circumstances and tragic circumstances, which if you know Monica, you know her story, but Monica lost her husband, Michael, in the World Trade Center on 9/11. And Monica, do you want to talk about that part?
Once upon a time. So unfortunately, as many know, I lost my husband, Michael Patrick Eichen, in Tower 2 on the 84th floor. And his best friend, Kerry, who is your uncle, Carin Winter, was able to get out of the building that day and survive the horrific attacks that took place, leaving Michael behind, not knowing it. He had thought that a group of them ran when the second plane hit. Before the second plane had hit the building, they just knew to run, and they thought Michael and the others were behind them. So when the plane did hit, he was somewhere in the 50th floor somewhere, and he just assumed that they just got they just moved around so much, and there were so many people that they just lost track of each other. So when he had gotten out, he had thought Michael had gotten out as well. And then of course the unfortunate reality was that Michael did not get out with a bunch of his coworkers. They sat at a desk of 16, and out of that group, 12 did not make it. So he was one of the fortunate ones. And I think he dealt with a lot of survivor guilt, especially knowing how Michael was about me. We had just been married 11 months. And, in the beginning, I did spend a lot of time with them, but I think it became too difficult for them to have me around because he was suffering with that. But then they had said, meet my niece Carin, because you're very spiritual and you do healing and meditation and things. So I said, okay, fine. Nancy was like, his wife said, go see Carin, she'll help you. And then our story began. So now you can take that lead.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. Yes, so you came to my house and we were talking and we did some healing work together. And I believe that, God does give people intuitive gifts, but at that time, I didn't really expect that to happen. But I was working with Monica and I said, I could just see you like live on CNN, I think is what I said, with like these prominent figures, like a president or mayor or someone, and you're at this podium. And Monica was like, oh no, I don't do that public speaking. I talk to the little people. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I could just see you being like part of this memorial or something. And then we talked about like how you were at Swan Lake the weekend before in Boston, right? And so we had this like instantaneous spiritual connection where we felt like soul sisters, I think, but because it was such a tragic time, it was just like a week after Michael had passed and there was so much going on, we didn't stay in touch. And then 10 years later, I was watching the news on my lunch break, and there I saw Monica in exactly what we had discussed. And she was at the podium cutting this ribbon for the World Trade Center. I think, was Obama there with you and Giuliani or Bloomberg or someone? There was like
any of those things. We were doing so
yeah. So they were standing there with you, and I was like, I have to find her because I feel like she I talked to her about this, that we had predicted this, And so I called you and you were like, actually, they're doing a film about me at the Tribeca Film Festival, and Hillary Clinton's in it and Bloomberg and all these people. Why don't you come down and check it out? So I went down there. And we were like walking around the memorial and we were standing there. And as we were standing there, Monica started talking about how she had September's mission. And I was talking about how I had this vision of bringing like an assembly to schools. At the time, I didn't know that it was going to be what I was already doing, like with the kids, like the mindfulness. I thought maybe it would be more like an assembly of some sort. And then I was like, yeah, I really want to start this project. And Monica was like, well, if you want to do that, come under September's mission. We were looking to teach nonviolence in schools and education in schools. So you can come under our umbrella. And at first I was like, oh, I don't know. And then at the same time, because I didn't know what I was doing, and then at the same time, MissionBe started really, well, it wasn't MissionBe yet. It was just me going in the school with the kids. And I had 7 volunteers from my yoga studio that were helping me bring it to the elementary school students, because I didn't have like the time because the high school was so busy. So these women rather, were helping me, and I was so inspired and I felt like, yes, I have to do this. And so me and Monica reconnected, and well, we had stayed in touch at that point. We stayed in touch, and I was like, yes, I want to go under your umbrella and launch this project. And it was super exciting. And she had ran September's Mission for a while, so I had no idea how to run a nonprofit. Like, I was a social worker. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just had faith and I felt guided. And so MissionBe went under her nonprofit, and it was amazing. But the day that we were going to meet, to decide, like, should we move forward and do this project, the night before I went for a walk on the beach at Robert Moses, which is like a Long Island beach. And I said a prayer to God, like, show me a sign that I'm on the right path, because it was a big leap of faith to start this project. And I was already doing a lot of work, doing other things. So I said a prayer to God, show me a sign. And within moments, a wave came in and a wave went out, and a yellow rose washed up at my feet. And I was like, okay, that was a really good sign. Like, roses don't just wash up in the ocean. I still actually have the rose in the other room in like a little container. Well, it's not like I saved it in a good way. It's just like in a glass jar. But the next day I went to meet with Monica, and we had lunch and we talked, and I showed her my whole project. And I was like, what do you think? And she was like, definitely. She was so encouraging. She was like, come under us. We can do that. Like, get it going. And so, and then we had this great meeting, and we both got a lot of goosebumps, and we were like, we just felt like it was very divinely guided. And then I was taking the train home, and we didn't like know what the symbolism of the yellow rose was. We just thought it was a good sign. But I was taking the train home, and I was supposed to change trains in Jamaica, but I like wasn't paying attention, or I got on the wrong train, I think. And so I'm just sitting down on the train. I remember this guy, Jamie, was put, she was like, sweetheart, you're on the wrong train. This train's going to the North Shore. You're going to the South Shore, like that Long Island accent. And I was like, oh no. And he's like, but I'm going to do you a favor. And he was an older man. He was just being very like caring. So he's like, I'm going to stop the train just for you in Hicksville. And my guy friends were like, they wouldn't stop the train for me. The stuff from Monica, right? And
so I know.
Yeah. So he stopped the train in Hicksville. And he's like, you're going to get off and my friend's going to stop his train and pick you up. There won't be any announcements. You're just going to get on the train. So like he asked his friend to pick me up. It was amazing. So I get off the train and then I see this poster and it's the 9/11 museum poster and it's a yellow rose. And I was like, what? So then I call you up and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the yellow rose. And then I texted you the picture and the posters had just come out, I think that week or something, and you hadn't even seen it yet. So we were both so surprised. And that was like the beginning of the project. And then we, I formed a board, a bunch of people joined the board and we got the whole thing going. And Monica's been by my side ever since.
On the board as well.
What?
Of course, I'm on the board as well.
Of course, yeah, you're on the board, yeah. So you were our founding treasurer, and Monica's still on the board to this day, which is great. And it's been really good. And so what we do today, like what MissionBe's been doing for the past, and did I leave anything out of the story? I'm just trying to remember.
No, I think you pretty much got the story correct.
Did I cover it?
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
We had other magical situations, but we'll get to those later.
We can tell some of those. We also have Mike Dempsey on the board, who is a survivor of 9/11.
Yes, Mike Dempsey came on shortly thereafter, and Michael was a 9/11 survivor. He also survived the Vegas shooting, and he does a lot for survivors in helping bring awareness. He did a thing in Parkland. He's really very helpful and of service to many, many charities. And he founded the 9/11 Education Trust. So from there, we hosted some events and we started to book schools, and then Fox 5 did a special on us. And it aired nationally. And this was like right after we had launched. I think it was around 2013-14 school year. And so it aired, and then I started getting calls from like a lot of the other local schools, like West Babylon, West Islip, Bay Shore, and then someone called me from like Oklahoma. We never made it to Oklahoma, but like it just went viral. And so I started doing it. The first couple of years I was a volunteer because I had like a regular, paying job. But then eventually I took a 1-year leave of absence from Islip to see if we could pull it off. Like I didn't know a lot of wealthy people. I didn't really know how to fundraise or any of that, but we figured it out. And I got a grant to live in a house in California, in San Francisco. It was like a startup house. So they taught you like how to create a business plan, how to, do all of those business type things that I wasn't that savvy in. And so I moved out west for that summer, and then I took a year leave of absence at Islip, and I was hustling, like scrambling and hustling, like I gotta find donors, I gotta make money for this company. And I didn't, my dad was a used car dealer, like I didn't come from a lot of wealth, and typically when you start a charity, like people or whatever, but I did meet a lot of people out there that were very generous and that gave through their foundations and through their grants. And then also in New York, we had the gala, we had the hockey event, we had a bunch of events that did well. The hockey event raised like 100,000. So that was like, oh, we're safe. Like I'm not gonna be waitressing. But then I officially quit Islip after 1-year leave. And then I was full-time MissionBe, and I've been on salary ever since. And the board's very generous. I have a great salary, benefits, everything. I feel very well taken care of, and we work very hard. So I now have an assistant, we have a bookkeeper, we have a team of mindful educators. We actually just put in a grant, and fingers crossed, everyone out there, I hope we get this grant to make 2 of our educators full-time employees. We're trying to build the company still. It's still very grassroots. It's still very small. Like, it looks good on paper because it looks like we're so big, but we're really not that big. We're tiny, and we just have a lot of support. We have an amazing advisory board. We have, you can just look at our website. We have so many wonderful members of our advisory board and executive board, and we have so many amazing educators and creative artists. But we're still like a small nonprofit, taking it one day at a time. So that's like the business part of the company. But let's talk about our mission, right? So like, what do we do? We serve kids. And so we have been in over like
300.
I don't even know how, I have to do a recount, but I think like way over 110 schools. So what we do is we have a business model where we go in and we train educators, teachers, school administrators, parents, and most importantly, children in mindfulness. So yesterday, for example, I was at a school in Long Island. I think it's in Nassau, it's Roslyn, and I trained a whole bunch of their school psychologists in the mindfulness practices and some movement and some breathing. And then I'll be back in that middle school and the high school the next 2 Fridays for full 6-hour retreats with those teachers and those psychologists and social workers. So basically what we do is we go in and we do like a professional development. So we have a whole curriculum that we created. It's kind of the same thing I was doing with the kids when I was at the high school, but it's been enhanced a lot. So the first week is understanding the neuroscience of stress. So how does stress affect the brain? How does it affect the prefrontal cortex? Should I teach them this part about the neuroscience? Would that be interesting?
I mean, I think, it is interesting because we need it more than ever now because of
we need it.
We're having a mental health crisis. People are committing suicide on a regular basis. And I think we really have to bring that back in and make people aware that that's not the answer. But we need more educators going out and really helping our youth. They're really suffering. This pandemic has been a detriment to them, and it's sad to see the young children committing suicide, at this point. So it's explain that it's a brain thing. It's 100%.
Yeah. And so it's really sad, the suicide thing. And I lost my sister to suicide, and we can talk about that a little bit later. So I really believe in prevention. And as a former substance abuse counselor, what I found at ISLIP is that teaching those kids self-regulation, working with the pre-K kids, right? Like they're so fragile and impressionable at that point. And the younger we are, the more mirroring neurons we have. So a child who is, in like 2 years old has way more mirroring neurons than we do, because they learn from our behavior and our affect. So they learn that it's safe to relax. They learn that this is a comfortable place. They know when mommy's upset or when she's angry, so kids sense that more than we do, and they learn from us. And that's why it's very important for us. And so what I was telling the psychologists and the teachers yesterday is that the more self-regulated we are and the more relaxed we are, the easier it is for the child to feel safe and relaxed. And I think that's a really important thing. So what happens in neuroscience is you have what's called the prefrontal cortex, and that's responsible for higher order cognitive functioning, information processing, thinking. And then you have something called the hippocampus, and it starts here and kind of dumps in the prefrontal cortex. And that's responsible for your memory. And then you have something called the amygdala. You actually have one here and one here, and it's the alarm center of the brain. So if you see a tiger in the jungle, your amygdala goes off, alert, alert, tiger, run from the tiger. So when that happens and the alarm system goes off, it inhibits the functioning of the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. So you ever notice when you're in a rush, you can't find your keys? It never happens when it's a Sunday and you have nowhere to go. It's you always lose your keys when you're in a rush because the amygdala is going off. It's a stress state. And that inhibits the functioning of our memory hippocampus and our general brain function in the prefrontal cortex. So mindfulness helps regulate that. And when it does that, it has this cascade of effects. So there's something called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So think sympathetic stress to our listeners, S, stress, sympathetic, P, peaceful, parasympathetic. It's probably backwards because I'm on Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay. Peaceful, parasympathetic. So we switch on and off into these different states, these two different states of being. So when we're in parasympathetic, after you get a mani-pedi, right, you're probably in parasympathetic because you have the massage thing going, or when you meditate or pray, or when you're walking on the beautiful beach, you're in parasympathetic. You're peaceful, your heart rate slows down, your digestion's intact. Intact, it's your digestion's functioning the way it should. Your hands aren't sweating, your heart's not racing. And so, you're more likely to produce the feel-good chemicals like serotonin and dopamine. But when you're in sympathetic, the stressed state, you're more apt to, your digestion slows down. People tend to store more fat. A lot of people gain weight when they're stressed, right? It's not just because they're eating more, it's because they're in sympathetic, maybe, so the heart rate races faster. And so there's this whole cascade of things that happen when we're stressed. So mindful, and then what happens over time if you're stressed is it wears and tears on our whole nervous system and our endocrine system and the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And the HPA axis, is connected to our hormones and our adrenaline and everything else. And when that gets dysregulated, it's not healthy for us either. When we're stressed, when we're likely to have inflammation in the body, and inflammation is not healthy, especially, and we're all concerned about inflammation now because of COVID too. We want to be as healthy as we can be. So this is not just, so the mindfulness practice isn't just good for kids, it's also good for the teachers and the adults. But that's the first lesson that we teach the children when we go in. So when we go in and into a class, we go in for 40 minutes and I get to do observations all the time. Monica's met some of our educators, right, at the events and stuff. And they all have like this special way about them. Like they embody this and they really believe in it. And, but when you go into the classroom, for 40 minutes, we start with the breathing practice. So the kids anchor in their breath. That'll be like we'll do the ocean breath, for example, where they close their eyes and they just imagine their breath moving just like a wave in the ocean, and they breathe in and they breathe out. And then the second thing is, so breath movement, then they get a little sleepy after the 2 or 3 minute breathing thing because they're so used to going on adrenaline. So then we're like, all right, now we're going to do some movements. So then we have them come up and they just do like different shapes or movements, and that takes like 2 or 3 minutes. Then we do a sharing circle. So then the kids will either get in like one big circle in the class, or they'll get like in tiny groups, and they'll be like, one thing that causes me stress. And then they all go around the room and they share one thing that causes them stress. And then like one of the educators will, like Ash or something, will take out the brain diagram that I just described. It's like a diagram, and they'll be like, this is what happens in your brain when you're stressed. And then we get them in group discussions and they talk about like, how do you manage stress and what's your solution? And what are some things you've tried? And then we talk about how mindfulness is something that you can use anytime, anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're in an airplane or a bus or in the car or your classroom, like you can just connect with your breath anytime, anywhere. So then we do that. And then what else? And then after that, we kind of summarize the lesson, and then we do a visualization. So the kids will go back to their desks, close their eyes, lean back, and then they'll imagine they're at the ocean, and they'll imagine the waves and the water and the light on the water, and we'll play like some ocean music or some like sounds on the iPod. And then we just close with another sharing circle. Like today I feel good, So that's kind of like how when we go into the class, that's what it looks like with the students. And we're in a lot of classes. Like we usually start, obviously we can't be in school like 365 days a year, because schools are only open 180 days a year. And we get like everything set up over the summer, and then get all the contracts going. And then we're like do scheduling. Like, I feel like I just stopped doing scheduling, honestly. It's like basically like September 1st through like whatever yesterday was, like, because what?
Never ends. I know.
It never ends because the principals are overwhelmed, a lot of them, especially with COVID. So like they might schedule something, but then they have to move it, or like this teacher is going on a field trip. So
catching up now.
Yeah, so it's a lot of scheduling and stuff. And so that's why we need to fundraise and stuff like that, because you can't, like, what we bring into the schools is good, but it doesn't cover everything. It doesn't cover the bookkeeper and the like the assistant and the web guy and all that stuff. So, and it's expensive. So we fundraise, but we charge the schools a fee. So we go into schools and we charge twice the amount for the teachers as we do the kids, because schools can afford it. And if they can't afford it, like we do it, either get grants or we do some pro bono stuff, when needed. But social emotional learning is now valued in our culture. Like we were talking about the suicide, like it's really, really very, very valued. And so people see the value, and also kids need it. And my goal is to make it that like districts have a subject like math, science, social studies, social emotional learning. So what I really like to see the country do and the state do is like say, we're going to take ownership of this and we're going to use some of your curriculums, but we are making this a mandatory course.